She was only 7 years old when her life quietly changed forever. Before that, her world had been small but warm. She lived in a modest house where laughter still echoed in the evenings. Her mother used to brush her hair every night, slowly, gently, as if time did not matter. Her father worked long hours, but he always returned with tired eyes and a soft smile. The girl did not have many toys, but she felt rich in the ways that mattered. Then her mother fell sick. At first, it seemed like a simple illness. The girl watched her mother grow thinner, weaker, quieter. Nights became long and filled with whispers behind closed doors. One morning, the house felt empty in a way the girl could not understand. Her mother never came back home. After the funeral, everything went silent. Her father tried to stay strong, but grief weighed heavily on him. He struggled to balance work, parenting, and his own broken heart. The girl noticed how he stared at old photos for long minutes, his hands shaking slightly. He loved his daughter, but he was drowning. That was when the stepmother entered their lives. She arrived with polite smiles and careful words. She spoke softly in front of others and promised to take care of the home and the child. To the outside world, she looked kind and responsible. The father believed her. He wanted to believe her. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The stepmother cooked meals and kept the house clean. She praised the girl in public and held her hand when neighbors were watching. But behind closed doors, her voice changed. She became cold, sharp, controlling. The girl was told not to talk too much, not to ask questions, not to complain. If she cried, she was told she was weak. If she smiled, she was told she was being disrespectful. Slowly, warmth disappeared from the house. The father noticed some changes, but he was too tired and too trusting. Whenever he asked, the stepmother said the girl was difficult and needed discipline. She said she was trying her best. The father wanted peace in his home, so he stayed silent as years passed. The girl grew quieter. She woke up early to clean the house before school. She washed dishes, scrubbed floors, and folded clothes, while the stepmother watched closely. Mistakes were not allowed. Even a small spill could lead to harsh words or long hours of punishment. School became the only place where the girl could breathe. She loved learning. Books felt safe. Teachers noticed how bright she was, how quickly she understood things. Some even spoke to her father, suggesting she deserved better opportunities. But the stepmother dismissed them all. "She is not special," she said. "She should learn to be useful." The girl heard those words many times. When she turned 13, the father died suddenly. The house filled with people again, but this time there was no comfort. No hugs that felt real. No promises that meant anything. The girl stood quietly during the funeral, her hands shaking, her heart numb. She felt truly alone for the first time after that day. The stepmother stopped pretending. Her kindness vanished completely. She no longer hid her cruelty. She reminded the girl every day that she was unwanted. She said the girl was a burden, a reminder of the past, a mouth that needed feeding. The stepmother took control of everything: documents, property papers, savings. She told the girl there was nothing left for her, that her father had died with debts, that she should be grateful to even have a roof over her head. The girl did not know the truth. She only knew that her life became harder. School ended early for her. The stepmother said education was a waste of money. Instead, the girl was sent to work after classes, then full-time. She cleaned houses, carried heavy loads, and worked long hours. Whatever little money she earned was taken from her immediately. "This is your duty," the stepmother said. "You owe me." At night, the girl lay awake on a thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. She wondered what her life could have been if her parents were still alive. She wondered if she would ever escape, but she never complained. She had learned that silence kept her safer, despite everything. The girl did not lose her kindness. She helped others when she could. She shared food with those who had less. She listened more than she spoke. Pain had made her gentle, not bitter. The stepmother noticed this and hated it. She did not want the girl to have dignity. She wanted her broken. One evening, the the stepmother made a decision that would change everything. She believed the girl was old enough to be useful in a new way. She spoke to people the girl had never met. Conversations happened behind closed doors. Papers were signed. Promises were made. The girl was told she was being sent away to work. "You should be thankful," the stepmother said. "This is your future." The girl felt fear but said nothing. She had no choice. What the stepmother did not know was this: her cruel decision, meant to erase the girl's future, was actually the first step towards something unexpected. Someone was watching. Someone who would see the truth, and someone who would change the girl's life forever. She left the house. Early one morning, with a small bag that held her few belongings, the stepmother had arranged for her to work in a place far from her old life. She said it would be good for her, but the girl could feel the stepmother's satisfaction in sending her away. It was as if the stepmother believed she had finally rid herself of a problem she had. Never wanted the journey to the new place was long. The girl sat quietly on the train watching the scenery pass by. Fields of green, small houses, people walking along dusty roads, all of it seemed distant and unreal. She felt a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. She did not know what awaited her, but she tried to imagine a life where she could breathe without constant fear. When she arrived, the place was crowded and noisy. She was introduced to the people she would be working with. Most of them were kind, but some looked at her as if she were invisible. The work was hard. From dawn to dusk, she was expected to clean, cook, and run errands without complaint. If a task was done incorrectly, she would be scolded. Yet, she did her work silently, quickly learning how to avoid mistakes. The stepmother had told everyone that the girl was difficult and lazy, but the girl worked harder than anyone. She carried heavy buckets of water, scrubbed floors until they shined, and cooked meals without burning them. She learned to hide her exhaustion behind a calm face. No one knew how tired she was inside. Days turned into weeks, and the girl began to notice small acts of kindness around her. One of the older workers shared food when she saw her eating the smallest portion. Another gave her a small notebook to write in, saying, "Write what you feel. Don't let anyone take your mind from you." These tiny gestures were like sunlight in a dark place. Even as she worked hard, the stepmother's shadows seemed to follow her. Letters came occasionally, delivered by neighbors or strangers. Each one reminded her of the stepmother's control. The words were sharp. "Do not forget who owns you. Be grateful for what you have. Your life is nothing without my permission." The girl crumpled the letters silently, reading between the lines how much the stepmother wanted to keep her trapped one day. A wealthy family arrived at the place where she worked. The girl was sent to help with preparations for a small event. She moved quickly, setting tables, arranging flowers, and serving tea. Everything needed to be perfect, or she would face the stepmother's anger later. But something about the event was different. One of the guests noticed her, not for the work she was doing, but for how calmly she handled herself. How quietly she moved and how she seemed to notice everything without being noticed herself. The guest was curious. He asked her simple questions, but she answered politely and carefully. She did not reveal too much about herself, only enough to be honest. The guest smiled in a way that surprised her. He seemed genuinely interested. For the first time, the girl felt seen. Not as a servant or a burden, but as a person with thoughts and feelings. After the event, she continued her work as usual, but she could not stop thinking about the guest. She wondered why someone so important would notice her at all. She wondered if it was only a polite gesture, or if it was something more. But she quickly pushed the thought away. She had learned that hope could be dangerous. It could make disappointment hurt more. Still, her days grew slightly lighter. She began noticing small details, the way sunlight fell across the floor, the sound of birds outside the window, the kindness in the eyes of people who treated her with respect. She realized that even in a life full of hardship, small joys could exist. But the stepmother was never far from her mind. She knew the letters would continue, the threats would continue, and the lies would continue. The girl imagined the stepmother smiling in her home, believing that she had successfully ruined her. That thought angered her, but it also fueled her determination. She would not let her life be destroyed by someone else's cruelty. One evening, while the girl was finishing her chores, she overheard a conversation that startled her. Two people were speaking in low voices about opportunities for her. They spoke of education, of guidance, of a chance to rise beyond her current life. The girl listened carefully, unsure if it was real or just a trick. She wanted to believe, but years of hardship had taught her to be cautious. Over the next few weeks, these small hints continued. Letters arrived from unknown people, offering advice or small gifts that seemed thoughtful and purposeful. A book on learning to read better, a small packet of seeds to grow plants, even a warm blanket in winter. The girl began to sense that someone was watching over her. Someone who knew her story without needing to be told everything. She worked harder than ever, quietly preparing for the day when she might meet this mysterious helper. She studied during the few moments she had to herself. She practiced reading aloud in secret, reciting letters and words she had never seen before. Her mind felt alive in ways it had not for years. Every night she lay awake, thinking about possibilities. What if life could be different? What if she could escape the stepmother's control, not by anger or confrontation, but by opportunity? Then one day, a letter arrived that changed everything. It was written in neat handwriting, simple but confident. It said that someone wanted to meet her, to understand her, to help her reach her potential. The letter did not reveal the identity, only the place and time. It promised safety and respect. The girl read it over and over, disbelief mixing with hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream. She imagined a life where she could study, where she could make choices, where she could be treated with kindness and dignity. She imagined a world where her stepmother's lies could not reach her, where she could be seen for who she truly was. The day of the meeting arrived. She wore her best clothes, not because they were fine, but because they were clean and neat. Her heart pounded as she walked toward the place described in the letter. The streets were unfamiliar, but she followed her instincts carefully, wary of any danger. She could not believe that someone so important could want to help her, but a small part of her whispered that it was true. When she arrived, the person waiting for her did not judge her for her clothes, her hands rough from work, or her tired eyes. Instead, he smiled kindly and spoke with genuine interest. He asked her about her life, her dreams, her fears. He listened without interrupting, without speaking over her. For the first time, she felt that her voice mattered. She told him small truths about her mother, about the stepmother, about the hardships she endured. She did not hide anything, but she did not exaggerate. She spoke simply, honestly, carefully. He nodded, sometimes jotting down notes, sometimes just listening. She realized he believed her. After that day, her life began to change slowly but surely. She received books to study, guidance on how to improve her skills, and advice on how to navigate the challenges she faced. The girl still worked hard, but now her work had a purpose beyond survival. She felt seen, valued, and capable. Even as the stepmother continued to spread lies and send threats, the girl grew stronger. She realized that her fate was not entirely in the stepmother's hands. Someone had noticed her courage, her patience, her resilience, and that person was determined to help her rise above the cruelty she had endured. For the first time in her life, the girl believed that the future could belong to her, not to the stepmother, not to anyone else. She understood that her suffering had not broken her spirit. Instead, it had prepared her for something greater. And though she did not yet know the full path ahead, she felt a quiet confidence that she could face whatever came next. And in the silence of her small room, with the moonlight falling on her notebook and the soft hum of the city outside, she allowed herself to dream freely. She dreamed of freedom, of respect, of a life where she could make choices and be proud of them. She dreamed of a world where cruelty could not define her. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a seed of hope take root, promising that her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. The girl's life had begun to change slowly, almost imperceptibly. Small acts of kindness, quiet encouragement, and unexpected attention had started to lift her from the heavy shadow that had followed her since childhood. Yet even as hope began to take root, she was careful not to trust too easily. Years of hardship had taught her that the world often showed one face while hiding another. She continued her daily work, rising early and performing chores until exhaustion threatened to pull her under. But now there was a difference. Somewhere in the distance, she knew someone had noticed her, not the stepmother, not the neighbors, not the people who had treated her as invisible, but someone who could see the strength in her quiet endurance. That thought alone gave her a new kind of energy. One afternoon she received another letter. This one was shorter, simpler, but it carried weight. It instructed her to visit a different part of the city the next morning. It promised safety and guidance, and it was clear that the person sending it wanted to meet her in private. Her heart raced. Could this really be happening? Could someone truly care enough to help her rise above the life she had been trapped in? The next day she prepared herself as carefully as she could. She wore the cleanest clothes she owned, tied her hair back neatly, and made sure her hands were washed. Every step she took toward the meeting was filled with nervous anticipation. The streets were crowded, noisy, and confusing, yet she moved cautiously, aware that any misstep could lead to disappointment or worse, danger. When she finally arrived, she found a man waiting. He did not look at her as a servant or as someone beneath him. He simply smiled and gestured for her to sit. His presence was calm, his eyes attentive, and there was a quiet authority about him that made the girl instinctively feel safe. For the first time, she did not feel small. He asked simple questions at first about her day, her work, how she spent her time. She answered honestly, keeping nothing hidden, yet carefully choosing words that would not reveal too much vulnerability. He listened with patience, without judgment or interruption. Every nod, every soft word made her feel that she mattered. Then he asked about her life before this. She hesitated. The memories were painful, the loss of her mother, the coldness of her father's new wife, the endless hours of labor. But something in his eyes gave her courage. She began to speak, quietly at first, then with more confidence. She told him about the stepmother, the stolen inheritance, the letters full of threats and lies. She did not cry, though tears threatened to spill. She simply told the truth, as plainly as she could. When she finished, the man sat silently for a moment. Then he spoke, not with pity, but with conviction. "You have been through more than anyone should," he said, "but I see your strength. You survived what others would have broken, and because of that, I want to help you. Not as charity, but because you deserve it." The girl felt a strange warmth in her chest. No one had ever said such words to her before. Words that did not carry judgment, manipulation, or expectation. Words that simply recognized her as a person. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond the stepmother's control of life where she could make decisions, learn, grow, and be valued for who she was. Over the following weeks, the man guided her carefully. He provided books, lessons, and advice on subjects she had only dreamed of learning. He taught her to read more confidently, to understand the world beyond her immediate surroundings, and to develop skills that could help her build a life independent of cruelty. Every new piece of knowledge was a small victory, a quiet rebellion. Against the life she had been forced to accept, the girl also learned the importance of observing the world around her. He taught her to notice details, to understand human behavior, and to act thoughtfully. At first she struggled. Her mind was clouded with years of fear and doubt. But slowly she began to see patterns. She began to understand how people acted, why they acted, and how she could navigate her circumstances without losing herself. The stepmother, of course, remained unaware. She believed the girl was trapped, obedient and helpless, working tirelessly to earn a fraction of her supposed worth. She did not know that someone powerful had taken notice, that her attempts to control the girl's life were already being undermined by forces she could not see. Every letter, every small act of support, was like a thread unraveling the web of lies she had spun. The girl's confidence grew with each passing day. She began to speak more openly, ask questions, and even challenge herself in ways she had never imagined. She discovered a love for reading and learning, a curiosity that had been buried under years of labor and fear. She wrote her thoughts down in a notebook, documenting her journey, her dreams, and her fears. The act of writing became a sanctuary, a way to reclaim a part of herself that had almost been lost. But even as she thrived under this new guidance, she could not forget the past. Memories of the stepmother's cruelty lingered, and she often replayed the moments of betrayal in her mind. She felt anger, sadness, and frustration, but she also felt determination. She knew that acknowledging her past did not weaken her. It strengthened her resolve to rise above it. One day the man invited her to a quiet meeting in his office. He spoke with a gentle firmness, explaining that opportunities were opening for her, but she had to be prepared. He emphasized the importance of self-respect, perseverance, and courage. The world may try to tell you who you are, but only you can decide who you become, he said. The girl listened intently, absorbing every word. She understood that this was more than guidance, it was a chance to shape her destiny. She began to practice the skills he taught her diligently. She learned to speak with confidence, to manage her emotions, and to present herself with poise. Every lesson was a step away from fear and toward independence. The small acts of courage she took each day became building blocks for a life she could call her own. Meanwhile, the stepmother continued her attempts to control the girl's life from afar. She sent messages, manipulated acquaintances, and spread false rumors. Yet the girl was no longer vulnerable in the same way. She had allies, knowledge, and a growing sense of self-worth. She learned to navigate the stepmother's schemes without giving them power over her. Each obstacle became a test of resilience rather than a threat. Over time, the girl began to dream bigger. She imagined a life where she could pursue education, travel, and meet people who valued her for her abilities and character. She dreamed of helping others who had suffered as she had, providing guidance, support, and hope. The man who guided her encouraged these dreams, reminding her that her past did not define her future. One afternoon, while walking through the city, she noticed small things that once would have gone unseen. The kindness of strangers, the beauty of the sunset, the simple rhythm of life continuing despite hardship. She realized that even in a world filled with cruelty, there were pockets of goodness waiting to be discovered. She began to believe that her own goodness mattered, that her resilience had a purpose, and that her life could be more than survival, it could be meaningful. She also began to notice how her presence affected others. People responded to her kindness, her attentiveness, and her quiet confidence. She helped coworkers without expectation, shared knowledge when she could, and treated everyone with respect. Slowly, she realized that the strength she cultivated was not only for herself, it could inspire others as well. One evening, the man asked her a question that caught her by surprise. "Do you believe in second chances?" he asked softly. She thought about her life, the pain she had endured, and the small victories she had achieved. Then she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "I believe in second chances. I want one." He smiled. "Then you must trust yourself," he said. "Not everyone will offer help, and not everyone will understand. But you have the strength to rise, and the wisdom to choose the right path. Never forget that." For the first time, the girl felt a sense of control over her own life. The stepmother's cruelty no longer defined her. Her past, while painful, had prepared her for this moment of possibility. She began to see that the world was not simply a place of hardship, it was also a place of opportunity, waiting for those brave enough to seize it, as days turned into weeks. The girl's transformation became more visible. Her posture changed, her voice gained confidence, and her actions reflected a new understanding of herself. She had become more than a victim. She had become a person capable of shaping her own destiny. And through it all, she never forgot the quiet, patient guidance that had brought her to this point. The man who had seen her potential, who had believed in her when no one else did, had given her a gift far greater than books or lessons. He had given her belief in herself. For the first time in her life, she truly believed that she could escape the shadow of the past. She began to imagine a future where she could be free, where her dreams were valid, and where her life could be shaped by her own choices. The girl had endured cruelty, betrayal, and loss, But she had also discovered strength, hope, and the possibility of a life beyond hardship. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning. Something greater awaited her. She had not yet seen the full extent of the opportunities coming her way, and she had not yet met the people who would play a crucial role in her journey. But she was ready, more than ready. She was prepared to face the world, to embrace possibility, and to become the person she had always been meant to be. The girl had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own worth. The small, quiet victories she had achieved under the guidance of the man who had believed in her gave her hope that she could finally escape the shadow of the past. Yet even as she learned and grew, the stepmother's presence lingered in the background, an invisible threat that she could never quite forget. It was a chilly morning when the first sign of change appeared. A letter arrived, delivered with care, not with the usual harshness of the stepmother's messages. It was from someone who had been quietly observing the girl's life, someone who had gathered evidence about the stepmother's lies and deceit. The letter explained that the truth about her past could finally come to light, and that she was not alone in fighting for justice. The girl's heart pounded as she read the words. Could it really be happening? Could the cruelty that had defined so much of her childhood finally be confronted? She felt a mixture of fear and hope. The fear was familiar. It had been her companion for years. But hope was new. It was stronger than any fear she had felt in a long time. The meeting arranged in the letter took place in a quiet office, filled with warm light and a sense of calm. The girl entered carefully, her steps measured but confident. She saw familiar faces, the man who had guided her, and others who had offered support from the shadows. They welcomed her without judgment, offering encouragement and reassurance. For the first time, she felt that she could speak freely without fear of punishment or dismissal. Documents were presented to her. Letters, contracts, records of transactions, and official papers that had been hidden by the stepmother. The girl studied them carefully, her eyes widening as the truth unfolded. The stepmother had lied about her father's estate, taken control of property and savings, and spread false stories to convince others that the girl was worthless. Everything she had believed about her future being sold was, in fact, a manipulation meant to trap her. The girl felt a surge of emotions: anger, disbelief, sorrow, and a deep sense of injustice. She remembered the years of labor, the endless chores, the harsh words, the fear, and the isolation. Each memory stung sharply, but now she saw that it was not her fault. She had been a victim of cruelty and greed, and the stepmother's lies had never defined her worth. With the guidance of her supporters, she began to plan a path forward. Legal actions were initiated to reclaim what had been taken from her. Witnesses who had seen the stepmother's manipulation came forward. Documents were verified, and slowly the truth began to form a clear picture. The girl realized that the world could be just, that those who had wronged her could be held accountable, and that she had the right to reclaim her life. The stepmother, of course, was unaware of the unfolding events at first. She continued her usual behavior, confident that the girl remained under her control. But the letters, meetings, and evidence gathering were quietly undermining her. Slowly, the foundations of her lies began to crack. Though she remained oblivious to the growing storm, the girl felt a mixture of emotions as the truth emerged. She had longed for justice, but now that it was within reach, she also felt apprehension. Confronting the past was never easy, and the stepmother's presence had loomed large for so many years. Yet, the girl understood that she could not move forward without facing the truth. She drew strength from the man who had believed in her, from the allies who had supported her quietly, and from the knowledge that her own courage had brought her to this point. As the legal process progressed, small victories reinforced her confidence. A court recognized that the stepmother had mismanaged the estate and had acted in bad faith. Witness statements corroborated the girl's experiences. Evidence clearly showed the manipulation and deceit that had dominated her life. Each success, no matter how small, was a reminder that the stepmother's control was waning, and that the girl's own life was reclaiming its course. During this time, the girl also continued her education and personal growth. She studied diligently, guided by the man who had seen her potential from the beginning. She learned to manage her emotions, to speak with clarity, and to make decisions with thought and purpose. She began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as someone capable of shaping her destiny. Someone with a voice and the ability to affect change. One day, she confronted the stepmother directly. The stepmother had arrived at the property intending to assert authority, unaware of the legal actions that had begun. The girl stood tall, her voice steady, her demeanor calm but firm. She spoke the truth, laying out the facts that could no longer be ignored. The stepmother reacted with shock, disbelief, and anger, but the girl remained unwavering. She was no longer the frightened child who had cowered at threats and harsh words. She was a young woman who had discovered her own strength, and who knew that the stepmother's power was broken. The confrontation was not violent, nor did it involve shouting or humiliation. Instead, it was a clear and quiet assertion of truth. The girl stated what had been taken from her, what had been stolen, and what she was reclaiming. She stood with the support of witnesses, documents, and her own unwavering belief in herself. The stepmother could argue, protest, and lie all she wanted. But the evidence was undeniable. After this confrontation, the stepmother's influence began to diminish rapidly. Neighbors and acquaintances who had been misled slowly recognized the truth. The girl's character, her resilience, and her integrity became apparent to those around her. People who had once doubted her now supported her. The stepmother, once confident in her control, now found herself isolated and discredited. Her attempts to manipulate the situation only highlighted the contrast between cruelty and truth. The girl's life began to shift in more tangible ways. She reclaimed access to the resources that had been hidden from her. She could now plan for her education, her future, and her personal growth, without fear of interference. The freedom she had longed for since childhood was no longer a dream, it was a reality, slowly but surely taking shape. Yet the most profound change was not in material possessions or legal victories. It was in the girl herself. She felt a deep sense of empowerment, a knowledge that she could face challenges with courage and resilience. She realized that the years of hardship had forged her into someone capable, perceptive, and determined. The stepmother had tried to define her, but the girl had refused to accept that definition. She had survived, grown, and now she could thrive. She also began to help others who had faced injustice. She shared her story quietly with those in need, offering guidance, encouragement, and hope. Her experiences, once a source of pain and shame, became a tool for empathy and understanding. She discovered that her suffering could be transformed into something meaningful, something that could uplift others who felt trapped by circumstances beyond their control. As the days passed, the stepmother's influence disappeared completely. Legal consequences and social recognition ensured that her attempts to dominate and manipulate were no longer possible. The girl could finally live without fear, without deceit, and without the shadow of a past that had once seemed inescapable. The man who had guided her remained a constant presence, offering support, advice, and encouragement. He reminded her that while justice had been achieved, the journey of life continued. The girl understood that the path ahead would have challenges, but she also knew that she had the tools, strength, and wisdom to navigate them. In quiet moments, she reflected on how far she had come. From a child silenced by fear, oppressed by cruelty, and deprived of opportunity, she had emerged as a young woman capable of shaping her own destiny. She recognized that her past, while painful, had prepared her for this moment of empowerment. She had learned patience, resilience, and the importance of trusting those who genuinely cared. She also understood the power of truth. Lies and manipulation could only hold sway temporarily. When confronted with courage, evidence, and integrity, they would crumble. The stepmother had believed she could control the girl's life indefinitely, but the truth had proven stronger. The girl realized that no matter how long cruelty may last, honesty and strength have a way of prevailing. With her life reclaimed, the girl began to plan for her future. Education, personal growth, and the ability to make choices became her priorities. She no longer feared the unknown because she had learned that she was capable of facing it. she began to dream freely, imagining a life filled with opportunities, meaningful relationships, and the ability to make a difference in the lives of others. And in this moment, she understood something profound. The cruelty that had once threatened to destroy her had, in fact, made her stronger. The stepmother's attempts to control and harm her had been met with resilience, intelligence, and courage. The girl had survived, and in surviving, she had discovered her own power. Her life was no longer defined by what had been stolen or by the cruelty of another. It was defined by her choices, her actions, and her belief in herself. The stepmother had thought she had sold the girl's future, but in truth, she had only delayed the girl's destiny. And now, with truth on her side and strength in her heart, the girl was ready to step fully into the life she deserved. The girl had finally begun to feel the freedom she had longed for all her life. After years of cruelty, manipulation, and injustice, the truth had emerged, and the stepmother's power over her had ended. But more than that, she had discovered her own strength, the strength to face the world, to dream, and to build a life on her own terms. She spent mornings studying, afternoons working on skills that would help her in the future, and evenings reflecting on her journey. Every day was filled with small victories, a sentence learned in a book, a new skill mastered, a moment of courage when she spoke her mind. She found joy in simple things, the warmth of the sun on her face, the quiet hum of life outside her window. The smile of someone who acknowledged her worth, the man who had guided her remained a constant presence. He encouraged her, taught her, and provided opportunities she had never imagined. Under his mentorship, she learned how to manage challenges, approach people with confidence, and make decisions that were thoughtful and informed. But he also reminded her that the greatest lessons came from within, from her resilience, her kindness, and her courage to keep moving forward. Despite everything, it was during this time that she met the billionaire who had first noticed her years ago, before anyone else had cared to see her. At first, she had only encountered him through letters and careful introductions, but now she met him in person. Unlike anyone she had known, he treated her not as a servant, not as someone in need of pity, but as an equal. He recognized her intelligence, her bravery, and the potential that had been buried under years of hardship. He asked her about her dreams, her goals, and what she wanted from life. She spoke cautiously at first, unsure if anyone would truly listen. But as he nodded and asked thoughtful questions, she began to open up. She spoke about wanting to learn, to help others, to create a life that was meaningful and independent. He listened without judgment, without interruption, and encouraged her to pursue every ambition she held. Slowly, he introduced her to opportunities she had never dreamed of. He arranged scholarships, connections with educators, and mentorship in areas she wanted to explore. He guided her, but never dictated her choices. For the first time, she felt that her future was hers to shape, that she could make decisions without fear of manipulation or harm. As her confidence grew, so did her independence. She began to take on challenges that had once seemed impossible. She spoke in public forums, shared her experiences with others who had suffered injustice, and used her voice to inspire those who felt powerless. People were drawn to her courage and her kindness. They respected her, not because of wealth or status, but because of the integrity and determination that shone through everything she did. The stepmother, once a looming figure in her life, had been removed from power completely. Legal actions and social awareness ensured that the stepmother could no longer harm her. Even then, the girl felt no satisfaction in revenge. She understood that her true victory was not in punishing the past, but in living fully and freely in the present. She chose to focus on growth, learning, and using her experiences to uplift others. Through this period, she continued to work closely with the billionaire, learning not just academic or practical skills, but also life lessons. He taught her about responsibility, ethics, and the importance of using one's position to make positive changes. He shared his own failures and successes, helping her see that life was full of challenges, but that courage and integrity could guide her through anything. One day, as they walked through a quiet park, he spoke softly. "You have endured so much. Yet you have emerged stronger, wiser, and kinder. Many would have let anger or despair define them, but you chose differently. That is why you were meant for something greater. You were not meant to be trapped in cruelty. You were meant to rise above it. The girl listened, her heart swelling with gratitude and a sense of destiny. She realized that every hardship, every tear, and every lonely night had prepared her for this moment. She was no longer the frightened child who had hidden in corners, silenced by fear. She was someone who had survived, learned, and grown, who now had the chance to shape a life filled with possibility over the next months. The girl began to take control of her life fully. She moved into her own home, worked on her education without restriction, and started to engage with people who shared her values and ambitions. She pursued projects that allowed her to help others, especially children and young adults who had faced hardship. She became a mentor, a guide, and an inspiration, showing that resilience and courage could transform even the darkest past into a hopeful future. The relationship with the billionaire also evolved naturally. It was built on mutual respect, trust, and admiration. He never pressured her, never attempted to control her decisions, and always encouraged her independence. Their connection was a partnership of minds and hearts, rather than a simple protector and dependent dynamic. She valued his guidance, but she also recognized her own agency and ability to lead her own life through it all. She never forgot the lessons of humility, patience, and perseverance. The hardships she had faced had taught her empathy, the importance of listening, and the need to act with integrity even when it was difficult. She carried these lessons into every decision she made, ensuring that her actions were not only for herself, but also for the betterment of those around her. Her past, though painful, had also become a source of strength. She reflected on it often, not with bitterness, but with understanding. She knew that the stepmother had tried to control her, but she had refused to be defined by cruelty. She knew that the loss of her mother had left her vulnerable, but she had transformed that vulnerability into compassion and determination. Every moment of suffering had shaped her into someone capable of resilience, leadership, and empathy. As her life flourished, she also discovered a deep sense of joy and freedom. She could travel, learn, meet new people, and pursue passions that had once been impossible. She experienced friendships, collaborations, and opportunities that expanded her world far beyond what she had ever imagined. She no longer lived in fear or limitation. She thrived in possibility. The girl also began to support causes that mattered to her. She helped children who had lost parents, individuals trapped by abusive situations, and young people who lacked access to education. She used her experiences to advocate for justice, equality, and opportunity. People admired her not only for her achievements, but for the kindness, courage, and integrity that guided every action. Through all of this, the billionaire remained a steady presence, but not as a shadow or protector. He became a mentor, a friend, and someone who inspired her to aim higher. He recognized her potential, celebrated her achievements, and encouraged her to dream without boundaries. Their relationship was built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared belief in the power of determination and integrity. The girl's transformation became a story of hope for many. She had emerged from a childhood defined by cruelty and limitation into a life full of possibility, purpose, and respect. She had reclaimed her future, not through revenge or anger, but through courage, perseverance, and the quiet power of resilience. One afternoon, as she looked back on her journey, she realized how far she had come. From a small, frightened child, silenced by fear, to a confident young woman capable of shaping her own destiny, she had truly been chosen for something greater. Every step, every challenge, every lesson had prepared her for this life, a life where she could make choices, dream freely, and inspire others to believe in themselves. She understood that being the chosen one was not about wealth, power, or influence. It was about recognizing her own strength, embracing opportunities, and using her experiences to create a positive impact. She had been chosen by circumstance, by mentors, and by her own courage to rise above adversity and become a symbol of hope. In the quiet moments of reflection, she allowed herself to feel gratitude, not just for the billionaire who guided her, but for every challenge, every setback, and every moment of pain that had shaped her. She had learned that true strength comes not from avoiding hardship, but from facing it, learning from it, and using it as a foundation for growth. Her future was bright, filled with possibility and promise. She knew there would still be challenges, moments of doubt, and obstacles to overcome. But she also knew that she had the resilience, the intelligence, and the courage to face anything. She had survived cruelty, reclaimed her life, and discovered the power within herself to rise above all limitations. And so, she stepped fully into her life, not as a victim, but as a young woman who had been tested and had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace everything the world had to offer. The stepmother's attempts to destroy her had failed. Her past, though difficult, had prepared her for greatness. She had become the person she was always meant to be, the chosen one, not because of wealth or privilege, but because of her courage, her integrity, and her unwavering determination to live a life defined by hope, strength, and purpose.